I really need you to hear me sing Hamilton. I'm so good, why can't I be on Broadway? I want to be on Broadway. I want the world to fall in love with me 8 times a week.
Hamilton, the musical phenomenon that has taken over the world in a way that no other musical ever has. Created by the icon of our lifetime, Lin Manuel Miranda, the musical highlights the journey of the man on the $10 bill, one of the founding fathers of America, Alexander Hamilton, from him immigrating to America, the impact that he had on the country, his personal life, and his demise with him being whacked off by his good homie and also enemy Aaron Burr. This masterpiece then concludes, leaving us with the chilling question: who lives, who dies, who tells your story? It's an absolute godsend. Now, this musical was a huge part of my adolescence, as it was for other terminally online losers who grew up in the 2010s. I felt a deep connection with Hamilton due to the fact that I too am a bastard and a Scotsman. Unlike other musicals that were established during this time, Hamilton still manages to maintain its cultural relevance in both society as well as online, despite the fact that it's been 10 years since it debuted on Broadway. Now, I do believe that this is due to the fact that the musical was lightning in a bottle and is of course a masterpiece. However, I do believe that the fandom that the musical has acquired is one of the main reasons why Hamilton has become the cultural phenomenon that we all know and worship today. So in today's video, I want to honour the Hamilton fandom and highlight the key sections of the fandom that helped the musical to gain and maintain its popularity and relevance within society. Now, most of the fandom was pretty normal and fine and like pretty wholesome. However, I must warn you that some of this is absolutely insane, right? And there is a very specific section that I am thinking of when I say this, so it may leave you disturbed to your very, very core. However, we will get through this together, do not worry. Anyway, let's just get into it. Now, before we dive into the Hamilton fandom, I thought it would be a good idea to give an overview of the background of this musical and the impact that it had on society. Prior to Hamilton, Lin Manuel Miranda had a great deal of success on Broadway, with his most recognisable work being of course the musical In the Heights, which incorporated the sounds of hip hop and salsa to bring to life a story based on Washington Heights in New York City, where Miranda grew up. In the Heights was given the chance to be on Broadway, with the show having a total of 1,184 performances that ran from March 2008 until January 2011. The show was nominated for a total of 13 Tony Awards at the 2008 ceremony, winning 4 of their nominated awards. These included Best Musical and Best Original Score. The musical also won a Grammy Award for Best Musical Show Album as well. In the Heights was so successful that it was even given its own movie adaptation that was released back in 2021. The success that Miranda gained from In the Heights is a success that aspiring writers could only dream of having. However, he and the world had absolutely no idea that his next creation was going to be one of the biggest cultural phenomenons to happen within the 2010s. After the success of In the Heights, Lin Manuel Miranda came across the bibliography of Alexander Hamilton, written by Ron Chernow in 2004. He was intrigued by the life of this man and came to the conclusion that his life and lore was so insane that it would make great content for a musical. He began to write the music for this idea and referred to it as the Hamilton mixtape. Miranda debuted the first edition of the opening track, Alexander Hamilton, in 2009 at the White House in front of Obama during the Poetry, Music and Spoken Word event. Lin Manuel Miranda has said many times that the musical took him a long ass time to create as well, with one of the longest numbers for him to write being the iconic song My Shot, which is of course Hamilton's I Want song in the musical. This took him around a year to write, so you know, it took him a long time to create this musical, this masterpiece if you will. Now, of course, because it is a musical, it is a piece of entertainment, some elements were written to be a bit more dramatic. Lin Manuel Miranda was a wee bit of a diva, a wee bit of a drama queen, and decided to exaggerate some things that happened within Hamilton's life to make it seem a bit more dramatic, you know, with a great example of this being Angelica's feelings for Hamilton. However, many moments within the musical were actually historically accurate and were true to the story of Hamilton's life. For example, the song The Reynolds Pamphlet actually incorporated text from the actual Reynolds pamphlet that Hamilton had published himself, so, you know, diva behaviour. However, despite this, the musical wasn't completely historically accurate, with small details being incorrect, such as the amount of Schuyler siblings mentioned within the musical being historically inaccurate. The first sneak peek of this masterpiece after the showcase at Obama's house was in 2013 at both Vassar College as well as the New York Stage and Film Powerhouse Theatre. This showcase was also referred to as the Hamilton mixtape, with most of the songs from Act 1 and some of the songs from Act 2 appearing during this showcase. As well as this, some of the cast members who participated in this showcase would go on to be cast in the Broadway musical in 2015, with this including Christopher Jackson as George Washington and Daveed Diggs as Lafayette and Thomas Jefferson. Most of the other members of the original Broadway cast would join in 2015 2014 with the workshop project that took place in the 52nd Street project. This seen the likes of Philippa Sue as Eliza, Renee Elise Goldsberry as Angelica, Leslie Odom Jr. as Aaron Burr, Anthony Ramos as John Lawrence and Philip Hamilton, Okerete Onawadwan as Hercules Mulligan, and James Madison joining the project. The show debuted off-Broadway in 2015, being met with critical acclaim and love from the audience as well as the Broadway community. The love shown to the off-Broadway production of the show resulted in it being given the green light to go to Broadway. As a society, we were blessed on the 6th of August 2015, as this was the day that Hamilton opened on Broadway, with its home being the forever iconic Richard Rodgers Theatre, which, fun fact, is actually where In the Heights was performed when that was on Broadway as well. Now, there were a few changes made to the show in between the off-Broadway and the Broadway productions, including the scratum of songs such as Congratulations, which still breaks my heart to this day. I cannot get over the fact that this man scrapped this godsend of a song. I will never get over it. I wasn't over it when I was like 13, and I'm not over it now.
I am untethered and my rage knows no bounds!
Many songs were rewritten as well for the Broadway production. As well as this, some new cast members were introduced as well, including Jasmine Cephas Jones as Peggy Schuyler and Mariah Reynolds, and of course Jonathan Groff as King George. The musical, and I cannot express this enough, blew up. It was met with immediate praise and critical acclaim from those within the industry as well as the Broadway community. However, the general public's response to this musical was like no other. Every single show was sold out, and according to the New York Times, an average ticket in September 2015 would go for $159, which is the equivalent to around $217 today with inflation. Now, the average price for a Broadway show in 2015 was around $103, so that's a huge jump from your average musical to Hamilton. And also keep in mind that Hamilton was a brand new musical, right? Obviously it had a wee bit of a cult following because of the off-Broadway production, but to the general audiences, this was a brand new musical, right? And that's the kind of prices that the tickets were going for just in its early days as well. And that isn't even including the resale prices, which would go for thousands and thousands of dollars. It was absolutely insane. Just getting your hands on a ticket for this show during this time was honestly like winning the golden ticket. It was absolutely insane. You are not getting a ticket to that show. You just weren't doing it, right? Unless you were a celebrity. Speaking of which, the musical developed fans from all around the world, including celebrities from Beyonce and Jay-Z to, of course, the original stans of Hamilton, Barack Obama and Michelle Obama. Now, of course, Hamilton went on to dominate the awards season that year. The show was nominated for a total of 16 Tony Awards, winning 11 of these, winning Best Musical, Best Original Score, and as well as this, Leslie Odom Jr. won Best Actor in a Musical for his performance as Aaron Burr, the icon that he is. Hamilton also won a Grammy like In the Heights did for Best Musical Theatre Album as well. The show is still incredibly successful today, with it showing absolutely no sign of slowing down, despite the fact that it's been 10 years since it debuted on Broadway. Now, this can be linked to the fact that it's a very critically acclaimed piece of art, and people from all around the world want to view it due to the fact that it is so critically acclaimed and it is so famous. However, I do believe that a really big part of the reason why this musical is so popular is down to the fan base that it managed to acquire. I'm going to split the rest of this video into 3 main categories, those being the early Hamilton fandom, the renaissance of the Hamilton fandom, and the current day fandom. And in each section I will highlight the aspects of these specific eras of the fandom, if you will, that helped Hamilton to become the cultural phenomenon that we all know and stand today. I would say that the original Hamilton fandom took place from around 2015 with the debut of the Broadway show until around 2019. Like most other musicals, the fandom began quite small, consisting of those who were already in the know of the musical from the off-Broadway production, or due to the fact that they were aware of the new show on Broadway with a great deal of critical acclaim. However, it could be argued that the reason that the Hamilton fandom expanded beyond what anyone could have ever imagined was due to the release of the Hamilton soundtrack album, which was released in September 2015. Now, this consisted of all of the musical numbers within the show being performed by the original Broadway cast, and it was put on streaming services such as Spotify and Apple Music, as well as physical copies such as CDs and vinyls being produced. The album became so popular that it managed to chart on the Billboard 200, debuting at number 12 and peaking at number 3 in 2016 after the Tony Awards, and again at number 2 after the release of the Hamilton Pro Shot in 2020, which we will touch on later on in the video. As well as this, it also managed to debut at number 1 on the Broadway album charts as well. Now, this cast album was absolutely showered with praise, with Billboard giving it a 5 out of 5 rating, as well as Rolling Stone giving the album a 4.5 out of 5 rating. Hamilton was such a unique musical in the way that the general public seemed to be really into it. Of course, us cultured people within society know that musicals are iconic and we could never live without them. However, the average person probably wouldn't agree with that, and I guarantee you, if you were out and asked just a normal person if they would like to go see a musical, give them free tickets to go see a musical, they would probably look like they wanted to spit in your face. Probably some of them would, to be honest, let's be for for real, right? So to put into perspective how insane it was for a musical cast album to do this well with the general public but on the charts and stuff as well, only 3 cast albums have managed to chart in the top 10 of the Billboard 200 and Hamilton was one of them. As well as this, in 2023 it was certified diamond, becoming the first cast recording of a musical to do this, selling over 10 million copies including streams. This highlights how insane the popularity for the cast album truly was, and it still is in comparison to other Broadway musical soundtracks, and it is because the general public, I believe as well, really got behind this musical. It's not just like people that are into musicals that like it, like for some reason it has such a grasp on the general population. I guarantee that there's people who listen to the Hamilton soundtrack who probably wouldn't listen to any other Broadway soundtrack. It's just that iconic. Now, the release of this album not only allowed for those who couldn't see the show in person due to location or financial restrictions to understand what the hype was about, it also began to draw the general public in, resulting in the musical's popularity growing like no other musical had done before it. However, I believe that one of the major pillars in this musical becoming as successful as it truly was the internet community that it managed to develop. This online community managed to bring in people that already liked musicals and people who maybe didn't like musicals. This developed due to a bunch of different factors that are common amongst other fandoms, such as like fan art and people doing like covers and stuff like that. However, one of the most unique and probably most popular subcultures within the Hamilton fandom during this time was of course the Hamilton animatic community that developed. Animatics, for those of you who are unaware, can be defined as a rough plan for an animation in the form of storyboarding. It's almost like the first draft of an animation or an unfinished animation, if you will. Talented artists within the online fandom took the cast recordings from the album and made their own animatics for the songs, interpreting the songs and characters in their own art style, often incorporating the style of the costuming of the Broadway show, as well as basing their designs for the characters off of the original Broadway actors as well. Now this, and I cannot express this enough, became so popular on platforms such as YouTube back in the early years of the fandom. I remember being obsessed with these, and it was actually how I found out about Hamilton, specifically the creator and our icon, Susan, who was probably, I'd say, the most popular creator within the Hamilton animatic community. Others within the community that I would say were incredibly popular as well included Zik Sua and Morsi Animations. As it was incredibly difficult to see the show due to, again, location and financial restrictions, these animatics gave fans of the show who couldn't see it in person the chance to have a visual representation of what the show could look like. Now, it is important to know that these creators within the animatic fandom for Hamilton also made animatics for other musicals as well that were popular at the time, such as Heathers and Waitress. However, the Hamilton ones were so incredibly popular, and I believe can be credited with introducing the show to those who had absolutely no idea about it. So thank you so much to the animatic divas. We will forever thank you for your service. Now, the fandom was also brought together with inside jokes that stem from moments within the show and within the soundtrack, such as the Aunt Peggy meme from the Schuyler sisters, or Hercules Mulligan screaming his name in the song Yorktown. There were often compilations of these funny moments on platforms such as YouTube as well, with animatics and fan art often using these memes. As well as this, the cast of the show were heavily involved with the fandom during this time, with behind the scenes videos showcasing their chemistry, and these moments also became inside jokes within the fandom, meaning that it wasn't just the show that was becoming a phenomenon, but the cast itself was becoming incredibly famous and developing fandoms of their own. However, one of the main ways that they managed to connect with the fans during this time was through the Ham for Ham scheme. This allowed for fans to participate in a daily lottery system that would give them the chance to receive front row tickets to see Hamilton, which of course was so crazy to get tickets for that this was like a really great way for fans to actually be able to see the show, so it wasn't just like rich bastards getting to see it. Now, in order to promote this, various members of the original cast would do short performances of songs from the show as well as other popular songs outside of the Richard Rogers Theatre, with fans crowding outside to view these performances, and these would often go viral. I remember specifically the Congratulations one, like I would watch that all the time. Now, the fandom was just like other fandoms, creating art and discussing the music and content from the musical. However, there were many instances of the fandom overstepping in terms of what was considered to be appropriate and in poor taste. Every fandom has their bad eggs, right? Like every fandom has people that are weird and a bit inappropriate and stuff in them who give their communities a bad reputation. However, those within the Hamilton fandom that would do stuff like this were kind of unique due to the fact that they weren't just creating art or discussing fictional characters, but instead characters that were completely based on real life people who were awful. For example, there was a great deal of fan art created for the show, and most of the fan art was absolutely fine and was wholesome enough, right? And it was usually based off of like scenes from the actual Broadway show itself, and it was created by, like the animatics, some incredibly talented individuals who were just interpreting the songs and content from the musical. However, some of this was in very poor taste, and a great example of this is unfortunately the elephant in the room. You were wondering when I was going to bring it up, and it is of course Miku Binder Thomas Jefferson Jefferson. Oh my god, kill me now. Now this was published on tumblr.com, of course it was, and it is basically an artist's interpretation of an alternate universe version of former US President, awful man, Thomas Jefferson as a 2010s college student. Now, the artist also drew other characters from Hamilton in this alternate universe. However, the Thomas Jefferson one very specifically went very viral because like it's just so absurd, like what the hell is going on here? Now, although the designs of the characters in this alternate universe were based on the original Broadway cast appearances, it is still important to note that the Broadway show is based on real people who were absolutely awful, and especially Thomas Jefferson. This man was absolutely rotted to the core. Now, I will specifically touch on this point later on in the video as well. It's just that it's important to bring up here. The artist faced backlash for multiple reasons. The first one kind of being the fact that it is very cringe, right? It is very cringe, and many people just thought it was really funny and would like laugh at it and would use it as an excuse to laugh at Hamilton fans as well, because like, I mean, like, I don't blame them, to be honest. Like, what the hell is this? However, it also brought up an important conversation at the fact that it was incredibly inappropriate to portray Thomas Jefferson as a progressive person due to the fact that he was a plantation owner and overall awful person. However, although this is still an important conversation to have, and it is still important to bring up the inappropriateness of this image. However, the fact that the image is so absurd and so inappropriate has made the internet almost find it funny, and so it has become like its own meme in recent years, and people will like reference it to bring up how insane the Hamilton fandom could be at times. As I said, I will touch on this whole point a bit later on in the video because it will come up again, but it's just important to bring it up here as well because it was a really big part of the early fandom as well. Some of them were a bit inappropriate, and I'm not gonna fully mention it in this video. I just don't want to get involved in this, right? But there was also a great deal of shipping going on, because of course there was shipping wars. Why are we shipping Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton? Like, why are we doing that? Why are we doing this? Like, please stop it now. Some of the fandom was a bit unhinged and a bit crazy, right? But also at the same time, they play devil's advocate. A lot of them were really young teenagers and stuff as well. You know, it's still important to have these conversations and to, like, you know, hold people accountable for that, because like, Jesus Christ, come on. Now, as the 2010s came to a close, the Hamilton fandom wasn't as active as it once was, with many of the original participants within the community becoming adults and moving on from being chronically online teenagers. It seemed that the fandom was coming to an end. That was until, of course, the modern Hamilton Renaissance. The Hamilton Renaissance, in my mind, began at the start of the pandemic in 2020, which of course led to the whole world having no choice but to shut down. Everyone was stuck at home, and in turn, the only real escape that we had from the pain and suffering of our everyday lives was in fact the internet, but specifically TikTok. Now, TikTok became extremely popular within the pandemic due to the fact that everyone had nothing but time on their hands and nothing to do as they were stuck at home. And as a result of this, subcultures began to develop on TikTok, from wholesome well-being content to the insane Minecraft YouTuber stands. There was something for everyone, even the craziest bastards of society. However, many subcultures that began to develop were from fandoms that hadn't been active in years, and these communities began to rejoice in the things that brought them joy when they were younger. The Hamilton fandom was absolutely no exception to this, as they began to post content relating to the show, including art, cosplay, and of course animatics. As well as this, they would also reminisce on the 2010s and being a part of the fandom back in the day. This attracted people to the Hamilton fandom because a lot of these posts would become extremely popular, who maybe weren't aware of the musical before because they were maybe too young or simply uncultured, and who weren't a part of the fandom during its peak. However, the renaissance of the Hamilton fandom wouldn't officially begin until the announcement that shook all previously chronically online theatre kids to their goddamn cores, May 2020, the day we will never forget. It was announced that the long-awaited Hamilton Pro Shot was set to be released on the streaming platform Disney+. No more would we be forced to watch the slime tutorials, but could instead watch the entire show the way that we'd all dreamed to back in the day, with the original cast in the original theatre. This news during the pandemic brought so much buzz around the show and the fandom, specifically on TikTok, resulting in the show being fully brought back into the limelight yet again. The reintroduction of the show to the general public, the older fans, and as well as the newer fandom that had developed on TikTok, resulted in the community being fully active again for the first time in years. And from this, the musical began to impact internet culture in many different ways. I would say probably one of the biggest ways that Hamilton impacted internet culture was of course through many of the songs from the musical becoming trending audios on TikTok. Some examples of this include of course that You Could Have Done So Much More If Only You Had Time meme that stemmed from the song Who Lives, Who Dies, Who Tells Your Story, the monologue between Barr and Hamilton in the song Non-Stop, the song We Know also became a trending audio, and of course the Reynolds pamphlet. These examples show how the show was still managing to impact internet culture despite the fact that the musical had been out for 5 years at this point. Now, I would say the biggest way that Hamilton impacted internet culture during the time of the Hamilton Renaissance was the phenomenon phenomenon of our icon Lin Manuel Miranda becoming a meme. After Hamilton, Lin Manuel Miranda became incredibly successful, as he should. For example, he went on to work with Disney, providing music for many iconic soundtracks including Moana and Encanto, as well as directing the movie musical Tick Tick Boom. However, during the time of the Hamilton Pro Shop being announced and released, people began to take the piss out of Lin Manuel Miranda due to the fact that they found him to be a little bit cringe and awkward. They would often use this image here of him biting his lip. This would often be done in the form of jump scares, you know, like you would be watching a video and then boom, jump scare, there would be Lin Manuel Miranda biting his lip. These images were also used as well, however the lip biting one was like the most popular, and they were often accompanied by demo recordings of Hamilton to make fun of him. This would ramp up specifically around 2020 to 2021 with the release of Encanto, where of course this infamous video was released to the public. I do believe that a lot of this was done out of love and that it was just playful teasing. Lots of fandoms do this with their faves. Pitbull is a great example of this, with his fans dressing up as him to attend his concerts. Obviously this is done to take the piss, but it's also done in a playful way that it's not meant to be malicious or nasty, but instead an inside joke within the fandom, and Pitbull has fully embraced this as well. Like, he's aware that it's not nasty, and I personally believe that a lot of the memes that came from Lin Manuel Miranda, like with these pictures, were just the Hamilton fandom trying to have a little bit of a laugh. I don't think that a lot of it was meant to be malicious. However, as most things often do, this turned absolutely diabolical, with people who weren't necessarily fans of the musical or Lin Manuel Miranda jumping on the bandwagon of this trend to actually send hate to him. It was kind of the same thing that was done to Matthew Morrison with the Glee fandom, where they would kind of make fun of Matthew Morrison because the character Mr. Shoe was insane, and because of that people started to actually hate on Matthew Morrison to the point where that man can't do anything without people being like trigger warning Matthew Morrison or like genuinely just berating him, especially during like 2020, 2021. I actually made a whole video about it, you know, you should go watch it, but it was kind of the same phenomenon that happened to Lin Manuel Miranda as well. It's really sad how people took kind of like an inside joke within this fandom and used it to berate him. A lot of people would criticise him for the fact that all of his songs, like in all of his projects, for example, like the stuff he done with Disney as well as Hamilton, all just sounded really similar to each other. Like, he has a very distinct sound, which is quite funny because it's kind of the thing people love about him, but people used it to almost like drag him as well. People also began to make fun of the fact that Lin Manuel Miranda cast himself as the lead in Hamilton, as well as criticising his voice in comparison to the other cast members of the show, which is just so nasty. Like, leave this man alone, my god. However, genuine criticism for Hamilton and for Lin Manuel Miranda began to be brought up during this time, specifically stemming from the idea that I discussed earlier in the video, that the musical was seen as glorifying slave owners and the founding fathers, who were overall awful people within history, with Thomas Jefferson being a great example of this. The man was a horrific, awful person. However, in the musical he's portrayed as like the comic relief and almost as like the funny, witty character, when in reality he was an absolute demon spawn. So a lot of people seen it as like incredibly insensitive. This is absolutely, as I said earlier in the video, an important conversation to have regarding the show, and I don't include that in the people that were like hating on Lin Manuel Miranda. Like, I do think that is a genuine criticism, so like people that were like just bringing that up, I don't think that was included in the hate, but people weren't even talking about that specific idea. People were genuinely just hating on him, which is, you know, a bit different from genuinely criticising him. So there were genuine criticisms for him during this time. It wasn't just people like hating on him, but a lot of it was genuinely people just being really nasty. But as I said, like, there were genuine criticisms for him, and this was one of them. The discussions around Hamilton, both positive and negative, as well as the memes and trending audios that stem from the show, kept Hamilton in the forefront of everyone's minds and played, in my opinion, a huge part in the fandom being active during this time. However, as it once did, the Hamilton fandom began to quieten down as the 2020s went on until the year 2025. This final section of the video is what I'm going to refer to as the current standing of the Hamilton fandom as of 2025. 2025 has been a huge year for the show and the fandom. I would say that the show began to gain traction again from those nostalgic for the musical as well as newer fans due to the return of the iconic original cast member Leslie Odom Jr., who after 10 years announced that he was returning to his role as Aaron Burr. This announcement was made in April 2025 and his debut would be in September 2025. This return shook the fandom to its core and resulted in the tickets for the shows that he would be in selling out almost immediately, with the only tickets being left being incredibly expensive. I actually also seen videos of people who aren't even from New York or from America buying tickets for the show and not having any way to get to New York, but just knowing that they would be there. And you know what? That is a level of commitment that I truly do respect. Now, this announcement brought a lot of people back into the fandom, and as a result, Hamilton became almost a meme within itself. Now, what I mean by this is that those who were nostalgic for the show would make inside made jokes about being in the fandom back in the 2020s or would make references to the lyrics within the show, with the Lin Manuel Miranda meme specifically making a huge comeback. However, this time the memes weren't done in bad spirits whatsoever and were instead done in a light-hearted way in contrast to the way that they were before. Obviously, I'm sure there's still people that they hate on Lin Manuel Miranda and they use these memes as a way to like hate on him and to be nasty, but for the most part, like for what I've seen, it's usually people who are in the fandom like doing it out of like good spirit and just in like a light-hearted way. For example, the lip biting meme, this absolute godsend of an image here, and of course this image of Hamilton looking sad at someone's phone, were still kind of popular like within the fandom and stuff. However, because of this boom in the Hamilton fandom, they began to become really popular reaction images and are still used to this very day that I'm recording this. I see them all the time in comment sections on TikTok. Now, of course, the trending audios were also back as well. The ones that I mentioned earlier kind of made a comeback. However, I'd say the biggest way that internet culture has been impacted by the resurgence of the Hamilton fandom has been, of course, the resurgence of people cosplaying as Hamilton. Now, specifically dressing up as Hamilton to demonstrate how much he truly hates his poor wife. The most common example of this is with the song The Best of Wives and Best of Women. By the way, just a side point here, I think it's so funny that all the songs that become trending audios on TikTok from the show are always like the weirdest songs. The whole musical is absolutely amazing, but it's never the songs that are like really popular within the musical, like Guns and Ships or like Satisfied, that become the meme. It's always the pure weird songs people don't really care about as much. Like We Know. Why is We Know a meme? Like why do people care about this song? It's so funny. Anyway, I just thought that was quite an interesting observation. But anyway, let's continue on. Now, as I said, the most common example of this was with the Best of Wives and Best of Women meme. This scene a person dressing up as Hamilton and trying to escape the conversation with Eliza while she tries to get him to stay. This trend was so popular that Hamilton was the 11th most popular costume searched for in preparation for Halloween according to Google in 2025. However, the Founding Fathers was at number 21 on the list, which suggests to me that Hamilton was a lot higher on the list than what was originally thought, because obviously, you know, Founding Fathers, like the only one we care about is Hamilton, of course. These videos are genuinely so creative as well, with people like trying to get away from Eliza in all these different ways, and this trend has resulted in creators like Ashby becoming incredibly successful. What's nice about this trend is that Lin Manuel Miranda actually knows about it and thinks that it's hilarious, even inviting Ashby and many other content creators who had participated in this trend to the premiere of the Hamilton Pro Shot opening night. Speaking of which, 2025 marks the 10-year anniversary of Hamilton debuting on Broadway and the beginning of the musical phenomenon taking over the world. To celebrate the 10-year anniversary, the cast and crew have been on social media connecting with fans like they did back in the day. One of the big things that they done to celebrate was releasing the Pro Shot in cinemas all around the world. This again reignited the Hamilton fandom, and past and present theatre kids who were ecstatic to experience this masterpiece in the cinema along with other Hamilton fans. This has resulted in many people going to the cinemas and singing along with these songs and experiencing the Pro Shot the way that Lin Manuel Miranda and the original cast and crew had originally intended, that being in cinemas. Witnessing the love that the musical has been experiencing as of late has been so wholesome to see. As someone that was a chronically online theatre kid who grew up in the 2010s, whose whole entire life revolved around Hamilton for a good couple years, it's so lovely to see that people are still so invested in this musical despite the fact that it's been 10 years since it originally debuted, and it's so nice to know that people love this musical just as much as I do. In conclusion, Hamilton was truly lightning in a bottle. Never before or ever since has a musical captured the world, and especially internet culture, the way that Hamilton did and still currently does. The fact that the musical is over 10 years old and is still just as popular as it once was, with the show's popularity resurging every couple years, highlights the fact that Hamilton is in fact a godsend of a musical.